Yeah, this is so confusing, because at best, the president could give you a warning or ask for a report or an explanation from you, like he has with other cabinet ministers, which then begs the question, what else could be at play here? Have you ruffled feathers in the department? John Steenhuisen suggested earlier that this may have something to do with questions you have asked about the controversial lotteries contract and also the transformation fund.
Maybe there's more to this, Clement. I don't know. I'm not an easy person to work with. I certainly did not join the GNU for the position and the title. I joined it not to go along to get along, but to make a difference and to make an impact. And I've been probing and I've been challenging a number of different issues respectfully and in good faith, behind closed doors, not leaking to the media. And, I think that this decision is premature and is an unnecessary provocation, ultimately.
So if you believe this was an unnecessary provocation, even your party believes that this is inconsistent. It's inconsistent, it's insubordination when you have people who have messed up, whom the president hasn't taken action against. The DA leader has now given the president an ultimatum to fire the compromised ministers in his cabinet within 48 hours, including Thembisi Melani, the Minister Nkabani, and Deputy Minister Mahlobo, or face consequences. What happens after 48 hours? Based on the decision of the federal executive, what are the possible consequences here if the president doesn't fire these people in 48 hours?
Well, that is going to be
Guys, so Andrew Whitfield himself, in a discussion here with Clement Maniatella, is actually also trying to clarify the reasons and, his articulation on why he was fired and he's been fired from the GNU. And I think it's really interesting, this particular discussion he has with Clement Maniatella, because most of the discussions I've actually seen with DA members and Clement, and also from your arguments here, many of them have actually seemed to kind of like been, maybe not so balanced from the perspective of the comments I've been listening to, reading here on this channel. But I think here Clement shows some really interesting empathy towards this move, and he actually also calls out the ANC for not firing the likes of Thembisi Melani during the time when she was being probed as Justice Minister, and several other ANC members. I really appreciate the way he tries to really have a balanced critique on how it is that, Andrew Whitfield could be fired for a visit to the U.S., maybe without proper, permission from the presidency, versus the likes of Thembisi Melani and some other ANC members who have actually been indicted, probably, I think, from the Zondo Commission to other commissions, I think the VBS investigations as well, yet they've not been fired. Let's just quickly listen to Clement as he analyzes this contradiction, and I'll be back for...
Is this really about the trip to Washington, D.C.? John Steenhuisen argued today that there are double standards here, and I don't think he's wrong. How many ministers or deputies have done worse and they were never touched? In fact, they were moved to other portfolios at best. What happened when Thembisi Melani, who was the justice minister, when she faced allegation of having received monies that flowed from VBS? She received a loan from a businessman who allegedly received kickbacks and benefited from the VBS looting. That's the man who's actually currently standing trial on corruption charges linked to the looting of VBS. Did the president fire her? No. He asked for a report and an explanation and then moved her to the Department of Human Settlement. You would have thought that action was going to be taken against the Minister of Higher Education, Nobuhle Nkabani, over her embarrassing mismanagement of the CETA board's appointment. Her belligerent attitude towards Parliament. She sent apologies after apologies over her behavior, and she hasn't been touched. The president asked for an explanation. I can go on and mention other examples where president has people in his very cabinet. John Steenhuisen mentioned David Mahlobo. You must go and read what the report that Sydney Mufamadi compiled around the role of David Mahlobo when he was at the State Security Agency. Go check out what the State Capture Inquiry said about the role of David Mahlobo when he was at the State Security Agency. Has he ever been touched?
for, Andrew Whitfield's full articulation. Really interesting discussion on why he thinks that it's unfair, why he was being fired. He's been fired from the GNU, going forward because of the fact that he argues that he was asking some really uncomfortable questions, and then he argues that also that he's really not an easy person to work with, and then also gives the consequences on his actions going forward. So let's quickly listen to Andrew Whitfield on this whole thing with being fired from the GNU and how the DA is going to counteract this, and share your thoughts in the comments.
That story, the Democratic Alliance calling on President Cyril Ramaphosa to fire other ministers and deputy ministers implicated in corruption within the next 48 hours. It follows the president's decision to fire the Deputy Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition for traveling overseas without permission. Well, at least that's what the DA believes. The former Deputy Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Andrew Whitfield, joins us now. Andrew, thank you so much for making time for us. Good evening.
Good evening. Thanks very much for having me, Clement.
And I must indicate that we reached out to the presidency for their response on this matter, and we were told that they are traveling. We reached out to the ANC as well. They've been unable to join us. Let's start maybe with the reason here, Andrew, that the president gave for removing you. What did he say?
He provided no reason other than to say that in terms of Section 93(1) of the Constitution, it's his prerogative to remove me from the position. And then one line to say that he thanked me for my service. And at no stage leading up to this letter that I received yesterday or up until this evening have I received any formal explanation as to what the reason may be.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the assumption so far is that he fired you because you went on this trip to the United States as part of the DA delegation without his permission. You requested permission to travel to overseas, as I understand it, as per the ministerial handbook. What did he say when you sent that request to go to the US?
He didn't reply to the request. The ministerial handbook or the executive handbook requires of us, it says that members of the executive should request permission to travel abroad. I did that. It wasn't an official government trip. It was a trip that I was requested to go on by my party, who I also account to, obviously. And after 9 days of following up consistently, the email was acknowledged. The receipt was acknowledged, but we never received a confirmation or a negative or an affirmative response to the letter. And I took the decision to abide by the request of my party to travel abroad under the circumstances where no response was received.
How soon did you send that request before the travel date? Because my understanding is that it has to be as early as possible to allow time for processing. What does the manual actually say about the timing?
The book actually says, in terms of official visits, which this was not, a minimum of 2 weeks is recommended. This was 10 days before I actually boarded the flight, so more or less 2 weeks. I mean, this was, in fact, in previous requests which were confirmed, where permission was given previously, those responses came through within a week or so. And so there's no reason why there shouldn't have been a response, in my view. But obviously, for whatever reason, and up until now, 4 months later, there still hasn't been a response to that specific request. So it's not clear why. Yeah. But there's been a lot of correspondence between my office and his since then.
Okay. Are you allowed to travel, though, without express permission, without a written consent? Because at the end of the day, you didn't get the approval.
Well, I think that under the circumstances of the GNU, I think that it would be reasonable for the president to presume that there are new members of the executive, that perhaps there was a different way to handle this. But to answer your question more specifically, I felt very strongly that 10 days was more than reasonable, a period of time to receive a response. And the fact that there was no response, I simply took silence as consent. and perhaps that was an error in judgment on my part. But at the same time, I don't think that the sanction, which appears quite dramatic against the backdrop that you've painted of other members of the executive and the history, for me to be, I think, quite possibly, Clement, the only member of the executive that President Ramaphosa has ever removed from the executive, I'm not sure, it is quite a historic decision to make on this basis. I think there were other ways to deal with this, even considering that I actually sent a letter of apology recognizing the position that I'd put the president in and never received a response to that either.
Yes, and that was now going to be my also point. And I'm glad that you recognize that maybe in hindsight, it could have been managed differently. I mean, treating silence as concerned. What I often hear from the ministers is that when the president doesn't respond, at best, you consider it as no, just to protect yourself. So when you apologize for traveling to the US without that express approval, when you apologized, what did he say about it?
No, there was no response to the apology. In fact, I'd sent previous letters because I'd had subsequent requests to travel declined, and now we know why, or we think we know why. And one of those was a personal request to spend a week at Harvard University to study inclusive economic growth, which is literally the apex priority of the GNU. That was declined. I requested explanations and I never received them. So from my end, I think I've taken reasonable steps to try to determine what the cause may be, how it could be rectified. I've even acknowledged the situation that I placed the president in, and that there was an error of judgment. But, to take 4 months to make a decision and then for that decision to be so disproportionate and inconsistent, in my opinion, I think that is an unnecessary provocation, considering the importance of the GNU and where we want to go as a country.
And when you came back, you're saying that there was no communication whatsoever from his office, no reprimand, just nothing?
No, not a slap on the wrist, not a request for a public apology or any of those sort of, I suppose, what you could call intermediary steps to discipline me in any shape or form. I think there were a lot of options available before pulling the trigger on what is a pretty final decision. Certainly has his signature on the letter, which makes it pretty final. But I think that, maybe there's more to this, Clement. I don't know. I'm not an easy person to work with. I certainly did not join the GNU for the position and the title. I joined it not to go along to get along, but to make a difference and to make an impact. And I've been probing and I've been challenging a number of different issues respectfully and in good faith, behind closed doors, not leaking to the media. And I've done it to the best of my ability respectfully, and in many instances in writing, which I now discover the ANC doesn't like anything in writing unless it's a termination letter.
Yeah, this is so confusing, because at best, the president could give you a warning or ask for a report or an explanation from you like he has with other cabinet ministers, which then begs the question, what else could be at play here? Have you ruffled feathers in the department? John Steenhuisen suggested earlier that this may have something to do with questions you have asked about the controversial lotteries contract and also the Transformation Fund.
Well, the Transformation Fund, I did write to the minister with my reservations on that. And I was looking forward to seeing what some of the public comments would be so we could reconcile those in the development of a consensus position on this issue. On the lotteries matter, I've been sidelined from that particular issue and have not had line of sight of anything surrounding that for the past 6 months. It's not within my delegations, but, it is a very important element of the work of the DTIC. But, that's the minister's discretion to decide who works on what particular project. And I've tried to be diligent in what's been assigned to me. I have asked other questions around legal sector codes, the Transformation Fund, the appointments to boards where I felt that there were a number of politically exposed individuals being appointed to critical positions. But I think that, I mean, my hope is that there is an understanding, certainly, that politics can be hostile, it can be difficult, and coalition politics in particular. And so I've been in this game before in Nelson Mandela Bay. I've worked in a coalition environment, and I've tried to conduct myself discreetly and in good faith. Sadly, that has not the favor doesn't appear to have been returned, and that is unfortunate. I just want to make the point again. Part of the responsibility that I felt that I had in this role was to provide oversight over some of the functions of the executive. And, you know, I think that that's important. I think that's something that the GNU actually brings to the table in this new era of governance in South Africa, is a new, fresh pair of eyes on a number of processes, decisions that need to be taken. And I think that's healthy. And you know, if those are the reasons that I've been terminated, well, then so be it, and I'll wear it as a badge of honor, quite frankly.
What was your relationship like with the minister and your co-deputy minister?
Well, I mean, you know, I suppose the political answer would be collegial, but you know, I think that I think it's been awkward. I don't think any of these relationships are supposed to be entirely normal and purely kumbaya, if I can put it that way. But, you know, I think that I've tried to act in the best of my ability in good faith, and I've been very impressed with some of the diligence and the approach of the minister and the deputy minister to a number of things. I see tremendous potential for this GNU in its current format to continue and to work and to strengthen. And I think that the president's decision has disrupted what is a learning curve for all of us in the GNU, from both the ANC, the DA, and other parties, is learning to trust each other to the best of our abilities, which is really tough. I acknowledge that. And learning to work together, and where we can't work together, to agree to disagree. And, you know, I think that this decision is premature and is an unnecessary provocation, ultimately.
So if you believe this was an unnecessary provocation, I mean, even your party believes that this is inconsistent. It's inconsistent, it's insubordination when you have people who have messed up, whom the president hasn't taken action against. The DA leader has now given the president an ultimatum to fire the compromised ministers in his cabinet within 48 hours, including Thembisi Melani, the Minister Nkabani, and Deputy Minister Mahlobo, or face consequences. What happens after 48 hours? Based on the decision of the federal executive, what are the possible consequences here if the president doesn't fire these people in 48 hours?
Well, I mean, that is going to be a decision that the federal executive will have to convene to take. And I think that what has been made very clear by the leader of the DA is that a line has been crossed, which is is going to be very difficult to turn back from. I just don't see a situation in which the DA can continue to operate in the GNU in the way that we have. I think that there are a number of options at our disposal. Leaving the GNU is one of them. And, you know, I think that the president believes that he, you know, for whatever reason, that he thinks that the DA is perhaps not going to take that decision, or perhaps the president simply doesn't want the GNU to work and has decided to provoke a reaction on something like this. I can't possibly imagine what's going on in the president's head. I have had some calls from some colleagues in the ANC who have been perplexed. They've been supportive. I've tried at all times to be as respectful as politics permits with colleagues. And, you know, I think that there's a bit of confusion inside the ANC around this as well.
Wait, did I hear you right that you got calls from some of the ANC colleagues who have been supportive?
Yeah, I mean, they've reached out and I've had a conversation or two, and I think that, you know, it was. I mean, I just assume that these decisions are are taken as a collective, as some like to say. But I think that, at the end of the day, there have been some good relationships built and there's been some good work done. And I think there's an acknowledgement from all parties involved, Clement. I think that this GNU has presented an opportunity for politicians to mature and to rise up and to resolve issues in a different way. And I think the president has not taken that route. He's taken a different route entirely. I think it's premature. And it's deeply unfortunate. And if there was another way to sanction me, if he'd raised this a month ago, 3 months ago, there's been 4 months. It's I don't know why the timing is now, and potentially putting the budget in jeopardy, which luckily didn't happen.